The stepping stones on this end of the creek have two of them in a small dip, and that dip is underwater constantly when the water's high, where the rest of the stones are high enough to get across without getting my feet wet. I'm going to replace the two stones over there in the dip with a little bit taller stones with the intention of being able to get across. And this video is going to show you how I make stepping stones. I have not seen a video on how to make stones that go across a creek. And I've had these for a while and decided to show how I do it. I start with a mold. The mold, in my case, is a piece of steel from a cedar. It's cut at the bottom, cut at the side, and it makes an excellent mold for the stones that I already have. But I needed one a couple of inches taller, so I'm making one custom. I'm using flashing instead of overturned flower pot or something else that you could easily buy at Home Depot to accomplish the exact same thing. The base has to be pretty sturdy. I use 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood at the bottom. The second one is got a small hole drilled in the center for a plastic pipe, which I'll show why I put in a little bit. And the third top piece is there for the mold attachment. Essentially, it keeps the mold from buckling out once it's in place. This one is cut custom for the steel mold that I've got, but it'll work just fine with the flashing mold that I'm about to install. I use 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood at the bottom because if I don't, the bottom of the stepping stone will be convex. It'll essentially won't be flat, and it will rock back and forth when you step on it once it's in the creek, unless it's got a lot of mud around it. What you're looking at is my normal mold once it's installed on top of the mount plate. I use a wire and just strap it up tight to hold the concrete in so the mold doesn't move. These are about 11 inches tall. And the pipe that I was talking about looks like that once it's installed. This is a completed stepping stone done before using the mold that I normally use. And this is optimal because it has a much smaller surface area at the top than the bottom. When you step on it, you want the person stepping on it to get closer to the center, and the smaller surface area at the top forces the user to do that. Next step in building a custom stepping stone, this is roof flashing. I bought it 20 inches wide and cut it so that it's about 14 inches tall. And the leftover I put at the bottom as a second strip for additional security, a little more strength at the bottom. It's wrapped at the base, and all I'm using to hold it together into the mold is the duct tape. And as you can see from the bottom, the mold of the wood frame at the bottom is keeping the material where it should be. When I'm done, I'll have to fold these in, and the only way to do that is to put an additional piece of frame at the top. So now I've put a frame on top, and I need to crunch in around the material, the flashing. I've cut about 6-inch slots all the way around, maybe 3 to 4 inches apart. The idea is that I'm going to crunch these down in the center so that they go into the hole at the top, so that the top surface of the stone is necked down. This one is about 14 or 15 inches tall, and it's going to take 2 full sacks of concrete to be done. You might ask why I didn't do it as a cone all the way up. Once you're moving these things around, rolling them is simple and practical. And if they are in the form of a cone, that becomes a lot more difficult to do, especially if you're in a creek and you're trying to get them from point A to point B. When they're nice and round, and this is what it's going to look like when I'm done, you can roll them very easily at the bottom, but you still neck down the top a little bit. It's ugly, but it works. So the last assembly work before pouring concrete, which I won't bore you with, is putting the top over the aluminum flashing, folding it in place so that it's centered as much as you can, and there's a small hole drilled in the bottom of the base. It only goes through the first piece of 3/4 inch plywood, and this is 3/4 inch PVC, and it only has to be big enough so that when you get to the creek, you can pound 5/8 inch rebar into the creek as far as you can. Or if you're on stone, you're going to want to pre-drill holes on the stone bed of the creek using a hammer drill. That's why the pipe is through the stepping stone, is so that you can hold or attach these stones to the creek bed. It could be that for your creek it never floods, there's just not enough water, or maybe it's a small ditch you're going across and the rebar isn't necessary. I strongly recommend that you do it anyway, because it will stabilize the stones, keep them from tipping and wobbling as much, even if you don't have the kind of flooding that I do in my creek. And here's the end state, full of concrete. Mix it up bucket at a time, maybe 10, 15, 20 pounds per bucket. Not more than I could pick up and put over the top. Could have put this on the ground and might have been easier, but I don't like the bending over, so for me it's more convenient to put up high where I can more easily see and reach. The creek is pretty far up today, but most days I can get across this without any problems. It rained heavily this morning. You can see that I've got all the stones across a big long bed of limestone underneath the water, and at every point in the center I've got a piece of 5/8 inch rebar driven down into the creek bed. Where the stone is, I rented a hammer drill from Home Depot. The smaller one that I had just wouldn't do the job, so if you're going to do it right. Rent a generator if you don't have one. It's got to be big enough to handle an 11 amp load for the hammer drill. Rent the 3/4 inch bit, drill all your holes. Every time you drill a hole, make sure that you put in your rebar immediately or you'll lose it. Once that's in, you put your stones in one at a time, and basically you tip the rebar into the hole. Use the rebar to lever it up, and then you drive the rebar down into the hole after it's where you want it.